As she spoke, the girl stepped confidently into the room. For a small amount of money, I'll do whatever you want. The young man maintained his composed demeanor. What if there's nothing I want? Not giving up, Lena leaned in closer, gently placing a hand on his chest with a seductive gaze. Don't lie, I can tell just by looking at your face. However, contrary to her expectations, the man exuded an aura of such absolute purity and monk-like calmness that Lena was instantly left dumbfounded, her face frozen in utter shock at the silent, impenetrable rejection. Seeing Lena's approach, the young man suddenly recalled the furious, roaring warning of an older mentor. Don't do it! You always have to be careful with in maids and prostitutes in general. Most of them carry sexually transmitted diseases. Back then, while tending sheep in the fields, the young man had naively replied, We have strong disease resistance, so it's not a problem for us. But the older man sternly corrected him. But if you're careless, you could pass it on when you're with another woman. Don't let desire trap you into doing something you'll regret. Flatly rejected, Lena stomped down the stairs in a huff, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. In the dimly lit room, the young man lay back on the bed, reflecting on his recent experiences. So cities aren't easy to live in either. The fruit shop earlier and now Lena too. To think they put a price on even small bits of information and conversation. Cities really are pretty cold-hearted. As he was lost in thought, a voice called out from the room. Boss, I've got something I'm curious about. His muscular companion, wearing a headband, stepped up and asked, Why were you trying to bring that guy along earlier? Honestly, he didn't look like he'd be much help. The young man smiled faintly on the bed. That's right. He's got a cocky mouth, so he'd be perfect to use as monster bait. Then his eyes softened, revealing a deep sense of empathy. It's because he reminds me of myself when I was young. Hearing he hunts with a weapon like that made me worry. If he's at least next to me, I figured he might survive a little longer. Hearing those sincere words, Monster Hunter Midden beamed with a radiant smile, speaking with admiration. Seriously, you're too good-hearted, boss. The silver-haired young man rested his hands behind his head and smiled back softly at his comrade's warmth. Well, maybe the city isn't all that cold-hearted after all. The next morning, the young man visited a magnificent official building featuring the city's classic architecture. Stepping inside, he approached the reception desk. A mustached clerk greeted him. Greetings. How may I help? The young man stared at him. Are you an official? The clerk frowned, replying dryly, Then what do I look like? Ignoring the attitude, the young man got straight to the point. I came to hunt monsters. The clerk echoed in surprise. Monsters? For a moment, the young man's memory drifted back to his past. The image of another older mentor, with a black and white beard petting sheep, who had once warned him, The world won't be kind to you. When he asked, Why is that? The mentor calmly explained, Because if you think about it the other way around, there's no reason it has to be kind. If you want people to treat you kindly, the method is simple. Reveal that you're a wizard. Then ordinary people will bow their heads. Back in reality, the clerk slid a paper toward him. You can't take it with you, so look and hand it back. The young man squinted at the crude drawing of a black, feathered creature, asking doubtfully, Is it a crow monster? The clerk replied sarcastically, Does that look like a cat to you? He then began to give serious instructions. It's unlikely, but if you kill a monster, bring its corpse into the city. If a wizard doesn't disperse the mana, it becomes a wraith. The clerk emphasized the strict laws further. If you kill a monster and leave it abandoned, under city law, the maximum penalty is execution. The young man replied with a sharp, unwavering gaze. I know that. Deep in his mind, the horrific image of a bloody wraith monster with grotesque fangs suddenly surfaced. I know what happens when a monster becomes a wraith. I can't repeat the same mistake. Meanwhile, oblivious to his shift in demeanor, the clerk continued to mutter. But don't knights hunt monsters? Do you think they're people with time to spare? Tapping his fingers lightly on the bounty poster, the mustached clerk explained with a disdainful look. A knight's job is to maintain public order in the city. Hunting monsters outside the city? That's for thugs like you to handle. Unfazed by the arrogant attitude, the young man silently turned on his heel and walked away, leaving behind the clerk's mocking mutters. He left. Another corpse is going to pile up outside the city. In a hidden corner, a giant, bloodshot monsters, I glared fiercely in the darkness. But the clerk was dead wrong. Shortly after, the bloodied corpse of the giant crow monster, a blade crow, was thrown onto the floor of the official building. The clerk and another colleague stared with wide eyes and cold sweat at the terrifying creature with a gaping hole in its chest. His jaw dropped, stammering in disbelief. This can't be. How in the world? Still in shock, the clerk stammered. You brought it back this fast. Did you kill it alone? The young man replied calmly. Indeed. Wasting no time, he coldly asked, how do I receive the bounty? The young man's composure sent the clerk into a panic, hurriedly running to fetch the money. We have to give it to you, of course. Here it is. You must have worked hard, so please go get some rest. He bowed deeply, tremblingly placing a pouch of coins into the young man's hand. Holding the heavy pouch of coins, the young man simply said, Thank you. Behind him, the two officials were still gathering around the crow's corpse, marveling in awe. That's incredible. The blade wings are still intact. Is it even possible to bring back a blade crow in this condition? The clerk looked up, surprised to see the young man still standing tall at the door. You're still here. The young man looked at the clerk, asking bluntly, Are there any other monsters worth hunting? The casual question made the clerk break out in a cold sweat, his face contorting. What? Don't tell me. You can still hunt more. The scene shifts to the inn, where a table is filled with a lavish feast. The voice of the maid, Lena, rings out excitedly. These are the most expensive items on our menu. I never dreamed that someone like you could defeat. Lena rested her hands on the table, smiling in astonishment. 30 monsters in just 3 days. You must have made a lot of money, right? The silver-haired young man calmly chewed his bread, completely unfazed by the praise. He took a sip of his drink and casually replied, Money isn't my only goal. More precisely, the goal is the monster's mana. In his thoughts, the young man recalled the moment he reached out to absorb the glowing green mana from the corpse of a small horned beast. Thanks to that, I definitely got stronger. He opened his hand, quietly feeling the power coursing through his veins. Compared to when I met Kiorn, my mana has increased several-fold. However, his eyes revealed a look of ambitious contemplation. Though, I can feel a limit. With only weak monsters' mana, it might be hard to get any stronger, he thought to himself. Interrupting his train of thought, Lena blinked in surprise. Actually, the young man looked up. What? Just then, the burly innkeeper walked over, wiping his sweat and laughing heartily as he looked at the empty table. You didn't steal a bite of this, did you? You ate it all by yourself. You're skinny, but you really can eat. I made it for the first time in a while, so I'm happy you enjoyed it. The young man stood up, politely preparing to leave. It was really delicious, the innkeeper eagerly promised. Then next time I'll make it even better. Suddenly, a rough hand reached out from behind, grabbing the young man's cloak and pulling him back. An insolent voice sneered, You eating something tasty by yourself? Accompanied by his smirking lackey, the short-haired thug jutted his chin provocatively. You skinny runt! The thug continued his loud threats. I heard you've been making a lot of money lately. How about giving some charity to your partner's dash? Before he could finish his sentence, smack. A lightning-fast, devastating slap landed squarely on his face, striking with such force that it sent him flying backward, cursing in pain. Fuck, bastard. The silver-haired young man stood perfectly still, his hand poised from the effortless strike, his expression unchanging and his eyes cold as he looked at the grounded thug. Didn't you want some charity? Enraged by the humiliation, the tall thug behind him roared, Don't get cocky, and swung a massive fist straight at the young man's face. But with sharp reflexes, he easily dodged the crude attack. Instantly, he delivered a powerful knee strike to the large man's stomach, sending him flying into the air with a scream, Yua! The kick was so forceful that the man was thrown back, crashing heavily into a large wooden pillar in the inn, splintering the wood with the sheer impact. At the same time, the short-haired thug who was slapped earlier picked up a wooden chair and rushed in for a sneak attack. But without even turning his head, the young man simply raised a hand, completely stopping the descending chair. The wood shattered against his overwhelming strength. The young man turned around, his gaze as sharp as daggers, and pressed 2 fingers firmly against the attacker's forehead, making him break into a cold sweat, his pupils shrinking in terror. With a simple, yet incredibly powerful flick to the forehead, the thug was blown backward, crashing onto the wooden floor. Cage! A weak plea began to sound. Don't! Don't! Lena, the maid, squeezed her eyes shut, holding her head as she screamed in panic. Fight in the iron! Her scream echoed through the room, drawing everyone's attention. A little later, outside the young man's room, the three thugs from earlier were standing with their heads bowed, looking meek and terrified. Midden, the monster hunter with the bandana, stood in front of them, bowing deeply in apology. I sincerely apologize. I gave both of them a proper scolding. The young man stood calmly with his arms crossed, leaning against the door frame, listening quietly. Midden continued to express deep remorse. This will never happen again. We've been tight on money lately. He sighed, looking back at his bowed companions. I guess they got jealous when they saw you. You too. Apologize already. Urged on. The two thugs hastily bowed deeply, stammering, sorry. The young man looked at Midden, his voice carrying a hint of thought. Are things that hard? Midden forced a smile, replying bitterly, We've just been limited. Clenching his calloused hand, Midden said with a resigned look, In about 3 days, I don't think we'll be able to pay the room fee, but that's our problem. The young man was silent for a moment, then suddenly pulled out a pouch of coins and tossed it to Midden. Here. Catching the heavy pouch, Midden's eyes widened in surprise. Why? The young man offered a gentle smile, replying, This is repayment for the kindness you showed before when you were worried and tried to bring me along. How did you know? The young man added, There's no such thing as free. Give me some information. Hearing this, Midden's face lit up, a wide smile spreading across his face as he confidently patted his chest. Information is what I'm best at. I'll tell you everything I know. The scene transitions to a panoramic view of the bustling city with its densely packed rooftops. Under the bright sun, the young man steps out of the city gates, embarking on a new journey. Walking down the forest trail, he thought to himself, This might be my last hunt in this city. He recalled Midden's helpful advice. Midden gave me information about the next city, so it's about time I left for there. The image of Midden enthusiastically talking to him in the inn appeared in his mind. There was a lot more useful information than I expected, and Midden really is a good person. He doesn't feel as seasoned as Kiorn, but that just makes him purer and kinder. Suddenly, the young man stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened, pupils shrinking. Ha! He took a sharp sniff of the air. This smell. A strong sense of foreboding washed over him, and he muttered, Please let my hunch be wrong. Without a second of hesitation, he instantly dashed forward with incredible speed, his feet kicking off the ground, creating a gust of wind. Upon arriving, he stood frozen, placing his hand on a large tree trunk scarred with deep, bloody claw marks. Standing in the eerily quiet forest, the young man stared ahead. Slumped against a tree was a bloodied figure, surrounded by pools of fresh blood on the grass. He slowly approached, looking at the dying man. This person, isn't he from Midden's group? The deeply wounded, blood-covered face of one of the thugs who had caused trouble for him at the inn came into clear view. The young man looked down at the man with a cold, quiet gaze that carried a hint of pity. He silently observed the victim's wide, lifeless eyes and the blood-soaked hand clutching a few silver coins scattered on the ground. Kneeling down beside the cold corpse of Midden, the kind-hearted hunter who was just recently smiling so brightly, the young man thought to himself, What in the world happened, Midden?